I'd like to welcome you here today. My name is Lori Bonai. I am the director, I'm on the faculty here at Seattle University School of Law. I'm the director of our Fred Korematsu Center for Law and Equality. And on behalf of the School of Law and the center, I want to welcome you here today. I'm really honored that you've been able to join us. This law school is one that's devoted to training excellent lawyers committed to social justice. And so we welcome this discussion of the unique risks faced by science and technology professionals in the present trade and national security environment, particularly those risks faced by professionals of Chinese descent. We're particularly pleased to be part of this program today because our own Nelson Dong, who teaches international business transactions here at the law school, is part of this program. The Korematsu Center is a center within the law school that engages in advocacy work to advance equal treatment and prevent discrimination. For example, last year it filed an amicus brief before the U.S. Supreme Court arguing the importance of diversity on medical school faculties. It filed a brief in another case challenging jury bias against a Japanese-American attorney. In another case, it challenged the use of profile evidence in a child custody proceeding that tied a father's potential for abducting his child to the fact that he was born in another country and continued to have ties with that country. Discrimination and profiling, unfortunately, continue to persist, and we fight it whenever we expose it, understand it, and speak out against it. Conversations like the one that we'll hear today are important parts of that fight. And I thank you for bringing that discussion here. Dean Clark, did you just walk in here today?
I just slipped in. Hello.
I wanted to introduce you to Dean Clark, the Dean of Seattle University School of Law. Dean Clark, would you like to say a few words of welcome to our audience here?
Oh my goodness.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do want to thank you so much for coming here today.
I should have slipped in 2 minutes later. Hello, my name is Annette Clark. I'm very proud Dean of Seattle University School of Law. I'm also an alumna, and so I just want to welcome you here today. This is not a subject that I know very much about, but I'm really looking forward to learning. I want to thank Lori and our Korematsu Center for sponsoring, and of course Nelson Dong, our good friend. So welcome to Seattle University.
Thank you, Dean Clark. Again, thank you so much for bringing this very important discussion here today. I want to introduce Angelina Wang, who's president of the Chinese Institute for Engineers in the Seattle chapter here, who will also provide words of welcome.
Thank you, Lori, and welcome everyone. We're very glad to have you here today. CIE, Seattle, is very proud to be hosting this event with many of our co-hosting organizations. So to kick it off, I do wanted to show appreciation to our co-sponsors. Shannon Owen from the Committee of 100 has been very great in collaboration with us. She's behind the video camera there. There's also the Xiaoqian Lu from the Society of Chinese American Aerospace Engineers, Seattle chapters, who has been a very great partner with us in many seminars relating to engineering issues. We also have Lori, whom you have met from the law school, and we're very thankful to have this opportunity to collaborate with them and talk about the topics that is so relevant to the work we do. So for those who do not have any experience with CIE, CIE stands for Chinese Institute of Engineers. We were founded in 1961. It's a nonprofit organization, member of the CIE USA National Council. We serve across about 10,000 CIE members nationwide. Our focus is promote academic and professional excellence in the Asian Pacific American community, specialized in collaboration and partnership in promoting STEM, science, technology, mathematics. And each year we support programs like professional development seminars, which is similar to this one that you're in. Welcome. We also have math and science program and scholarship programs. So if you want to learn more and get involved, we have tables in the back as well as for our sponsoring organizations. So I wanted to also introduce Nelson and George. They have previously said they would introduce themselves, but with all the work they've achieved, I think it's worth for us to kind of present that. So Nelson is a Seattle-based partner in international law firm of Dorothy and Whitney LLP, and he heads its National Society Law Group. He's a member of the President's Export Council Subcommittee on Export Administration, also a White House Fellow and U.S. Department of Justice official in the Carter administration handling international and national security issues. He is served as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston back then, and he's a graduate of Stanford University and Yale Law School. Okay. And our second speaker, Dr. George Koo, is a former technology industry executive with over 30 years of experience working on cross-border transactions in China, Taiwan, Japan, and the United States. He's a former board chair of the Asian American Multi-Technology Association in Silicon Valley, which is the area's largest leading organization of Asian American entrepreneurs in the technology sector. Okay, he's a member of Committee 100 and the Pacific Council for the International Policies. Dr. Koo holds an SB and SM from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a science doctorate in chemical engineering from Stevens Institution of Technology, and an MBA from Santa Clara University. Please join me in welcoming our speakers today.
George and I are going to collaborate on this presentation with you this afternoon. We thank you for giving up some of your Sunday afternoon to join us for this important discussion. Just a couple of housekeeping details. First, to express again the gratitude of all the co-sponsors, to Annette and Clark, Dean Clark, and Lori, and others here in the law school for making the facility available today. This is a great help for organizations that don't have a lot of money and don't have a permanent venue. In addition, in case you haven't discovered it, the restrooms are on that end of the building and around the corner. So help yourself also to water and snacks in the back. We're going to try to plow through this for about 90 minutes or more, trying to get everybody out of here by 3 o'clock so that you can enjoy some of the beautiful spring weather outside this afternoon and be with your families. So George is going to kick this off and help us to understand who the Committee 100 is and how we got to this point.
Thank you. My mic on? Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. Angelina did not introduce me in telling you that I'm actually a native of Seattle. I came over from China when I was 11, and I grew up in the northern part of Seattle between University and Wallingford, and I went to a high school that no longer exists. It's called Lincoln High School, and we had the best basketball team in its days when I was there. It's very nice to be here. I expected an entirely different kind of weather from what I can remember of Seattle, so I'm very happy that I was able to bring a little California weather with me. Maybe it's global warming, you know, there's good side benefits to it after all. And I too want to echo my gratitude for the sponsoring organizations. What I just heard about the Korematsu Center fits right in with what we're going to talk about today, which is that why Chinese Americans working in the technology field in the U.S. faces some very unique set of challenges that are very different from other ethnic groups. However, if you're not ethnic Chinese, but you're ethnic Asian and you look like a Chinese, you could be subject to the same biases that we face. So that's the beginning. Why Committee 100 has taken an interest in this subject? Well, we as an organization was formed right after Tiananmen Square, and we actually have two major missions, and the two of them are tied together. One is to promote positive relationship between U.S. and China, and second is to promote and making sure that Chinese and Americans in America are entitled to and enjoy all the privileges that go with being a citizen of the United States. And what we observe, the reason we have these two objectives is that they're very much tied together. when U.S. and China are not friendly, are hostile, the Chinese in this country become potential spies, become enemy agents, and all the baggage that goes with it, the negative part. So what we have decided to do, and this is the second in the series of our presentation, we would like to alert the Chinese Americans what the dangers are. You know, on the one hand, this country, the good news about this country is the rule of law. The bad news about this country is the rule of law. Why is that? Nelson, being a professional lawyer, will go into it, but you'll find the complexity of the legal system is such that you can unknowingly trip over some of these regulations and get in trouble. But beyond that part of it, the other part, which I will tend to concentrate and talk about, is that there is a history of bigotry and racism in this country that are set against the Chinese in this country. And so that's an above and beyond risk that's overlaid to the complexity of the regulations. And this is what we're going to talk about is, we're going to talk about the history of racial profiling as a tee up to the real subject matter. Nelson is going to review some of the increasing Chinese population in this country, particularly the students that's coming over. He'll review the various rules and regulations that governs the kind of work that we do. Then we're going to have some specific cases to show how different people can get into trouble, either willingly or unwillingly. And it's the unwilling part that I probably will spend time talking about. Now, we very much would like input from you folks at the end of the talk as you leave, because we're trying to continue to improve on this presentation and make it more relevant so that we can take it and go across the country. Nelson and I are not the only ones that are going to be talking on this subject. We have, for example, we have Brian Sun, who is the attorney that defended Winho Lee's family. He's very much involved in putting this together as well as speaking on the subject. And there will be others that will be participating. And Sharon is temporarily out. There's Sharon Ouyang. She's the staff member from the Committee of 100. And she will be collecting critique forms from you because we take this very seriously and we're going to be very interested in how you respond to what we have to say today. Okay, so with that, let's go on to the main body of our presentation.
I think what we want to stress to you is that this is an effort to provide some educational background, even though this talk is being given in the law school and I am an attorney and also an adjunct professor here. We're not trying to give you legal advice, and this is, C100 is not a law firm, but we're going to talk a lot about how the interaction between lawyers and the law and how scientists and engineers function in this country.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to, we're a tag team. If I forget to say something, Nelson will fill in and vice versa. But we do want to say that we're doing this on a pro bono voluntary basis for information purposes. There won't be a business solicitation afterwards, and there's no commercials tied to our presentation. As you can see, I guess when I first came over in this country, there are very few Chinese compared to where it is today. You know, the Asians have become an increasingly large population, a large part of the population in this country. And among the Asians, the Chinese is the largest portion, about 25%, or 4 million people. And as this slide shows, it's concentrated in certain geographical areas in the U.S., and they tend to be areas where high-tech industries or technology-based industries are concentrated. Now, despite the fact that we have made so many important contributions to this country, dating back 150 years when the transcontinental railroad would not have been possible without the Chinese labor. Because the most difficult part of the railroad, which is in the California part, through the Sierra Mountains, was done on the blood of the Chinese workers. Starting from there, the spacesuit was developed by the Chinese. The development of the integrated circuit was developed by the Chinese. You know, just on and on and on. But despite all that, we don't seem to be recognized as a full-fledged citizen of this country. And that's one of the points that I will come back over and over again. So if you look at the history of biases, these are some of the caricatures that demonize the Chinese going back to the 19th century, leading up to the 1882 Exclusion Act. Okay, so this is just some of the samples. And in 1882, they finally came down and said, no more Chinese are allowed in this country. Why is that? Was because if you go back a few years, there was a Burlingame Treaty of 1868, which says the U.S. and China will recognize the citizens of the other country with all the full rights and protection of the law. Well, the Chinese came, the economic conditions in China was terrible. They migrated over here looking for gold in the mountains or working in Chinatown and doing other things. And when the economy fell down in this country, then all the Chinese became targets of all the racism, the xenophobic feelings that came out among the whites. And you'll see this history repeat over and over again. Whenever the economy is down in this country, there is this tendency to look for scapegoats. And for whatever reason, Chinese become the favorite scapegoating target. So the most famous in the recent history, or near distance history, was during the 50s when Joseph McCarthy was asking all kinds of questions like, who lost China? Who's to blame for, quote unquote, Americans losing China? For the red baiting and for all the anti-communist extremism that he was holding the various senatorial hearings. The bottom line of the Red Scare that McCarthy was responsible for led directly to the arrest and jailing of Chen Shih-sun, who at that time was the founder of JPL, developer of the American missile technology. And he was under house arrest for a number of years until finally the Americans delivered him, basically handed him to the Chinese in the mid-50s. So in a case, one of the most significant ironies, if you will, we actually handed China the beginning of the missile technology in the person of Chen Shih-sun. There's a book written about it called The Thread of the Silkworm that Iris Chang wrote that you can read about more. In more recent history is during the early years of Clinton presidency, when his opposition, political opponents, are raising the supposedly, allegedly illegal money coming from Asia. And the U.S. rules does say that you're not out, you can get all the money you can to run your political campaigns as long as the money is not from foreign sources. Well, by besmirching Clinton, alleging that all that money was illegal and was coming from China, the critics couldn't even tell the difference between Xilai Temple from Taiwan and supposedly the Buddhist movement in China. These two are famous nuns from Taiwan, for example. The whole idea at that time was to use, again, China, demonize China to try to blacken the political opponent, in this case Clinton. And this is a picture of Brian's son, our colleague, who ended up taking a very active role in defending the Wen-Ho Lee situation, the Wen-Ho Lee case, which brings up to the next slide, Cox Report. How many of you remember or have heard of the Cox Report? The Cox Report came out in 1999, and the report basically says, it was a huge report. The gist of the report is there are tens of thousands of Chinese entities in this country, and they are all storefronts for spies. And not only that, all the Chinese in China, Beijing, the way they spy is to collect tidbits of information from all the ethnic Chinese who has a sense of affiliation with their motherland. And all that tidbits of information, when collected and sent back to Beijing, somehow when they cobble it together, they have the blueprint for the multi-head missile. Okay, and that's serious discussion. One of the most famous proponent of this theory of grains of sand is a Dr. Paul Moore, who was the FBI expert on China. And he goes around and talk about how this China spies conducts espionage differently. They do it by collecting bits of little information. The irony for Dr. Moore is that he was a carpool buddy going to work every day with Robert Hansen. They ride to work together. Now, how many of you know who Robert Hansen was? Anybody? Robert Hansen was a double agent for many years, selling secrets to the Soviet Union. He was finally caught after many years, but this guy who knows all about Chinese spies doesn't even know a real live Russian spy sitting next to him. Then the Cox Report culminates in the famous Wen-Ho Lee case. I'll just briefly review the history of Wen-Ho Lee for you. The Cox Report came out and basically indicated that China has stolen all the secrets to the multi-head missile and that the spy came from Los Alamos. The pressure was so great, and the New York Times published an article in March, I think it was March 6th, 7th, somewhere around there, saying that they have been identified as spies from Los Alamos. A day later, Secretary Bill Richardson, in his most courageous move possible, said, "We know who the spy is. It's Wen-Ho Lee." This guy had no due process, nothing, except they identify him as a spy for no apparent reason. But now that they have identified him as a spy, they're going to have to find evidence. So the FBI trailed him for about 6 months, follow him when he goes fishing in the fishing hole, and so on and so forth, just to see if they can find some evidence on him so that they can justify the claim that Bill Richardson made. Finally, they arrested him, put him in solitary confinement, ball and chain. He was allowed 1 hour of exercise in the yard. And they thought maybe with putting him in solitary confinement, he would crack and confess. Well, interesting, they arrested the wrong guy for another reason. Wen-Ho Lee is your typical, what we in Chinese call Su Daizi. Okay. He never read the newspaper. He never watched TV. He didn't know what was going on in the outside world other than the technical discipline. So while he was in solitary confinement, he was using that time thinking about a textbook that he was going to write. So the psychological impact of solitary confinement didn't work in this case. The sum total of this case was that the judge apologized to Wen-Ho Lee for his mistreatment. The FBI had to admit in court that they fabricated evidence against Wen-Ho Lee. So by all rights, Wen-Ho Lee should have gotten compensation for the time served. Instead, to justify the 10 months of solitary confinement, he had to plead to a downloading of government data into a computer, which is against internal laboratory procedure. We will hear time and time and again, you don't want to go up against the U.S. government because you cannot win. There is the expression, and we have a former mayor here from Bellevue that can tell you, you can't fight City Hall, and it's very true. You cannot fight City Hall, right? So, I think we're, this is teeing up for the real meat of this conversation.
George and I often take slightly different views about American history, but I think his summary, short as it was, is roughly accurate. The trajectory, the arc of American society's reaction to Chinese in America has often been very much calibrated to the economic situation here. And when times are hard, almost for all minorities, if you see the immigration debate that's been going on in the last 5 or 10 years in the United States, there's concern among workers in the United States. You see it in the resistance to more H-1B visas, competition for even engineering and technical jobs, such as those that many of you hold, and whether the government should allow more foreign engineers and scientists and mathematicians to come to the United States and work here or not. So this constant tug of war has been there a great deal. I think it's fitting that we're part of the Korematsu Center here in this center today, because if you go back and read the historical accounts of the 1920s and 1930s, the Japanese Americans who were working here at the time did not have the privilege of working in technology. For the most part, they worked very heavily in agriculture, particularly here in Washington State and Oregon and California. And the reaction at that time to their competition and their ability to drain fields at the farm and make them productive where other people could not was by and large to enact laws that made it illegal for them to own property and illegal for them to become citizens, illegal for them to transfer property to other people. And so there are a whole series of these combined socioeconomic and legal reactions to Asian immigration at that time. And this cycle has happened over and over again. So we are sort of asking you to think about what we're going to talk about in specific cases and so on in kind of a historical context, because we don't live in a vacuum, and there are always these historical precedents that show how the larger society tends to react to some of these kind of stimuli. At the moment, we're in a very unique point in American history where we have more Chinese coming to America now to study than ever before in the history of the United States or of the history of China. I've given you some of the statistics here for the last several academic years, and you can see that we're now approaching 250,000 Chinese students studying actively in American colleges and universities. This is just an unprecedented number. What is very interesting is that there are almost 30% of all foreign students studying in the U.S. today. This is having a remarkable effect on many, many campuses, and you can somehow sense this even here in Washington State about debates about available admission slots for children in U.S. schools and state schools in particular, because of the number of foreign students who are arriving here from China. Many of the states are able to charge full tuition or even a surcharge for these foreign students to arrive. And so to some extent, as state funding for various state universities has diminished, for instance, in the University of California system today, the UC system in California derives only 11% of its total budget from the state of California, from taxpayers. So they have to look for 89% of